Coming up, the one word that no one wants to say in this presidential campaign. It's quite amazing that in this presidential campaign, the two main candidates, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, are such polar opposites. Why is it that neither party is using the word capitalism in their campaigns? It's fairly obvious why the Democrats don't, but it's disappointing that a businessman like Donald Trump, who has made his wealth in the capitalist world of free enterprise, does not use the word in his campaign. One of the problems is that most of America looks at capitalism as the cause of their problems rather than the cure. Many people think that capitalism is essentially the opposite of the benefits and services received through socialism. The fact is that's not true. Capitalism, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is the societal structure based on property and the free exchange of property. There is no government intervention in true capitalism. That's why in the world there has never been true capitalism, save for the few years in the founding of America. But once the Constitution came in, actual free enterprise, unfettered capitalism was doomed forever. Socialism is an invention of the political realm. The goal is to essentially obfuscate the apparent unfairness of nature. Today they use the term leveling the playing field. The problem is once it starts, in America, they decided that aluminum was taking the place of steel, and so the steel lobbyists forced Congress essentially to start an antitrust suit against Alcoa back at the turn of the century. And that was the first time that the Constitution was actually used to thwart a successful enterprise. But the most important thing that people need to understand is that everyone is in fact a capitalist. I have termed this Hill's Law. All human beings are capitalists regarding their own property. Whatever you do with your property is your decision because you own that property. So even if Karl Marx, the famous communist, gave a coin to a blind pencil salesman on the street, that was an act of capitalism. He essentially traded his property for either feeling good or for taking a pencil. So people need to understand that capitalism and its root is simply the free exchange of property between property owners. There is no third-party interference in true capitalism. Again, America has really never experienced, and no country in the world has ever experienced it, America being the one country that had a shot at it, true capitalism. It's hard to imagine where America would be if the states really competed independently, that the federal government essentially was a service organization to handle large things such as national defense, if in fact other countries attacked it. If you look at the history books, you'll realize that that's essentially what started the Continental Congress, the idea that after defeating England, they wanted to set up a structure whereby the states would work together in case they were attacked again. And from that, of course, politicians really started feeling their oats and all of the extra things they could do with money that was taken from the individuals in the states. Where we are today is quite amazing, and neither candidate seems to discuss the benefits of the free enterprise system. And I believe that right now the candidates have essentially evolved or regressed, if that's a better term, into a negative popularity contest. Who is hated the least? And I believe that most people have essentially forgotten the difference between someone in the Oval Office who has relied on free trade and free enterprise, and someone in the Oval Office who has never achieved anything from trading in the marketplace. But I do believe that as you realize that Hillary Clinton states that she and Bill left the White House broke and today are worth over $100 million, that they have learned a lot about free trade and free enterprise. So Hillary might be able to work with Congress, no matter who controls it. Certainly it looks like the Republicans might hang on to the House of Representatives, but the Senate is still in doubt. So it's going to be an interesting time. It's really amazing that we are so comfortable with the term fair share today. These are terms that essentially came completely through the socialist networks in the world. The idea that the richer you are, the more that you owe society in taxation. Where did these ideas come from? The progressive income tax. The more that you make, the higher percentage of your income you have to pay back into society. Free public education. Many educators have stated over the years that anything worth having is worth paying for. And the problem that's come about in America's attempt to make all education free is a vast bureaucracy where most of the money in our educational system goes into administration, not to the teachers. The result, of course, the teachers complain, they unionize, and the primary goal now of a teacher is to advocate for higher wages. There are few teachers who wake up in the morning with the goal of having their class be all grade A students. Again, where did this come from? Well, you can trace it all the way back to 1848 in a book published by a gentleman known as Karl Marx. The book, The Communist Manifesto, is not about what most people think communism is, the fears that were outlined in the great communist scares in the 1950s with Joe McCarthy. The Communist Manifesto makes little mention of the physical coercion that is required to keep people in line in a fully communistic country. But history has shown that if you call it socialism, most of the things in the book have actually come to pass. We do have the progressive income tax that Karl Marx outlined, and of course we have free public education for all children. Even though America now is at the bottom in education scores, we fail to realize it's because federal funding has really upset the natural marketplace for turning out quality educated children. The other issues outlined in the Communist Manifesto are interstate commerce, which we have today, where the government controls things going between states. The central bank, the idea that the government would control a bank as the Federal Reserve, supposedly a private bank, to essentially manipulate the economy. And of course, that has been a dismal failure. Right now, the Federal Reserve has essentially allowed and, in fact, caused our debt to skyrocket to nearly $20 trillion. Few people read the Wall Street Journal, and as a result, they don't know that on January 1st, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, so concerned over the strength of the dollar with a $20 trillion debt picture, that the IMF is introducing their own currency. And many banks around the world are setting up to stock their banks with security capital from the IMF currency, thus selling off their supply of US dollars, which before had been the asset base of their bank. it's scary to think what's going to happen when they do that. It could be slow, as people say, what is this new currency? Or it could be very fast. So whoever gets to be the president next week, they're going to face an entirely new world as people start questioning the value of the dollar as a result of our incredible profligate spending, a lack of concern for debt, the desire for social equality, which essentially requires the government to force businesses to comply with things that are not successful in the marketplace. Obviously, the minimum wage sounds, oh, that's so fair. But the reality is, statistics show that when minimum wages are raised, the lowest employee in many companies is essentially let go. So the politicians can say to the person in the unemployment line, of course we don't have unemployment lines anymore, they just mail them a check, but the politician can say, okay, you don't have a job, but if you did have a job, you'd be making $10 an hour. So next week's election is certainly going to go down in history no matter who wins. It's either going to be the first woman president in history or the first businessman with a successful track record to take over the Oval Office. Whoever wins, they're going to have to face some major economic realities that no president in history has ever had to face. We'll comment more after the election. I look forward to having you subscribe below if you enjoy hearing these programs. Thank you.